Today we're going to bring a message entitled, The Discipline of Waiting. The Discipline of Waiting. You can be seated. Now, depicted in the thumbnail is Elijah calling fire down from heaven. And as much as we would love to just jump ahead and witness Elijah calling this fire down from heaven, we must recognize this moment as the beginning or the turning point. When Elijah standing before Ahab, he's talking about it's not going to rain until I say it's going to rain. That's the turning point in Elijah's life, which allowed Elijah, this turning point allowed Elijah the ability to call down fire. All of us want to call down fire. But what is it that gave Elijah the ability to call this fire down? That's what we're going to search out today. And as such, I began praying that, I do every week, but I really began praying about exactly when our turning point may have occurred. Individually, but also corporately as His church, do we have a turning point? If so, when did it occur? When did it appear? And did we miss it? And when I say miss it, we just missed a turn. We didn't recognize the turning point. Well, it wasn't long in prayer. I was quickly reminded that I have been tenuring here for 10 years. March 15th, I think it was, 10 years been here preaching. And those 10 years have gone by relatively quick. Now, I soon recognized, as I was praying, it's like I saw the 10 years and then God began to, through prayer, began to reveal that these 10 years had been broken down into 2 5-year segments. And as I began to look at each segment, the first 5 years, there were several, when I say several things going on, I'm talking about, we could say VBS is just different things that were happening. The first 5 years and the second 5 years, they don't look anything alike. They're totally different. And so I began to ask myself, and there, of course, asking God in prayer, God, okay, I've been here 10 years, there's 2 5-year segments, neither one look alike. So what happened here in the middle that separates these segments, but also, could be our turning point? So as I'm praying this thing, each segment is separated by an event that not only has reshaped us and whether we realize it or not, reshaping this church, but this singular event has actually reshaped the landscape of the entire earth. It was a pandemic known as COVID-19. Now, I'm not here to get into it, not here whether we believe it or not. That's the point. That's not the point. The point is that's the turning point. Because it is from that moment in history that we should learn 2 important lessons. Here's the first lesson. Satan overplayed his hand. Now, before I go further, and I know y'all don't know where I'm going, but y'all going to have to help me preach. I hate to shout the place down by myself. Satan overplayed his hand. How did he do this? Because following this pandemic, we began to witness men and women's sports. We began to witness drag queens reading books to children in public libraries. Peace and safety began to invade the nations of this world, leaving the nations unsecure. Lawlessness began to abound in the streets of the cities across this world. Here's the big and the staggering thing that should really scare us. Less than 1 year after the return from the pandemic, there was a 4 to 6% drop in regular church attendance. Now let me go ahead and tell you what they considered regular church attendance. Regular church attendance is showing up 1 time a month. So look, we've already seen, well, if you only show up 1 time a month, you ain't regular to start with. So it fell 4 to 6% from that point. So that lets you know how drastically church attendance has fallen. What is the second lesson we should have learned? Out of that moment, there were 3 types of churches and 3 types of Christians that emerged after the pandemic, post-pandemic. Those who incorporated a woke ideology with Christian theology, creating a freak that some want to call a church. Others return back to the norm with little to no change, as if nothing had ever occurred. But I'm here today to speak to and to talk about a third and final Christian or church that was birthed after that moment, because they saw this moment as a moment of change, as a turning point in their life, in their church, and in their nation. Because they recognized that Satan had opened the bowels of hell on this earth, and they became infuriated. They recognized something had to change. And they were needed at this time, so some began to stand up. They were unaware of what to do next. See, this new breed of Christian did not know what was in store, what would happen next, or what would require them to be able to call fire down from heaven. But they have been willing to endure in order to obey. 1 Kings chapter 17 verse 8 says this. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, Arise, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and dwell there. See, I have commanded. Now, I want you to really remember this last sentence, because this is going to be important in a moment. I have commanded a widow there to provide for you. That's important. Because, see, it does not matter if you're Moses, if you're King David, or if you were the prophet Elijah, or us today in this church. There is a biblical pattern that holds true for everybody. Moses did not immediately stand before Pharaoh, and he did not immediately part the Red Sea. David did not immediately go and slay a giant. And Elijah certainly did not immediately go and pray down fire, inciting the nation's first revival. God moved all of them into a wilderness, into a period of time, doing what many presume as menial tasks before they were even faced with their largest assignment. Why should we expect to be treated any differently? That is why I said, post-pandemic, there has risen a third group that is coming out. That is, they recognize Satan overplayed his hand. They recognize the evil in the world. But that group has been told to abide. Wait. I know you're on the backside. I know you think you have been forgotten and people don't even know you're there. But he's saying, but wait. See, a servant of God, not willing to hide themselves first, is not ready to call fire down from heaven. See, this is the place in this moment in which we are to prove ourselves. See, during a famine, Elijah multiplied the meal and the oil until the famine was over. He then, we see, raised her son from the dead, exhibiting the resurrection power of God. But nowhere do we read in any of the biblical accounts or any of the historical accounts, we do not read where any one person came to see the miracle. If there had been a famine in the land, by the time he goes to the widow's house, 1 year had already gone by. He spent 2 years at the widow's house. And let me put it this way. If I'm here and I'm Elijah and I'm hidden in the widow's house, all of y'all are out there, but we're all experiencing the famine. And your ribs are beginning to show. And your belly's beginning to growl because you don't hardly have anything to eat. But yet you'll see a widow woman, her son, and the man of God, they may have to go to the market, wherever, go get something. They're kind of fat and happy. Wouldn't it kind of question you? Why are you gaining weight? Why does your countenance look better than mine? And I would track you back to your house, peek through the crack to see what have they got hidden in that house that I don't have. You see, we don't see anybody coming to find out the miracle. Doesn't that sound real familiar? We have stayed true to God's Word, and we have had moves of the Spirit of God and the moves of God during this period of time, these last 5 years, yet nobody is coming to see what God is doing. Let me remind you what Christ spoke in Luke. The one who is faithful in what is least will also be faithful in much. It's a test to see whether you're going to be faithful. See, here's what I have termed this. I consider myself, and you may not, that's fine. I'm not labeling you or tagging you. I just want us to understand, we are the frustrated Christian. See, since our turning point, God has carried us into a wilderness, a place in which He is preparing us to call fire down from heaven, a place in which we are being prepared to stand before rulers and before the giants of this age. And we are frustrated because it appears as if others are being involved in what God is doing, yet we seem to be in a standstill. Why isn't anything happening for us, is the question. You see, the Bible has no set time in which any of these people waited. But the timing, I believe, was contingent upon their assignment and how we must be prepared. Some of us, and this is the reason of the delay, bear with me, don't judge me. Some of us are more stubborn than other people. Guys, this is not a good time to elbow your wife. Father's Day is coming up. Some of us are more stubborn. Some of us have built walls and we have built barriers and we don't let anybody in, and these walls and barriers have got to be removed. Some of us don't want to give up our desires and our wills and our passions. And God has got to break that because it's all about His will be done on earth, not yours. So, what good is waiting when we are needed now? Nothing is going on. Why do we have to wait? Well, let me take you to a classroom. And I call it the widow's classroom. Because remember, we read it. God told Elijah, go to this widow's house, and I've already told her, so she knew before he knew. Here he is, the prophet, the man of God. He said, I've already told her you're coming, and she's going to provide for you. I would have been mad. God, how come you couldn't put me up in the king's palace? But I got to go to a widow's house. But there's some parallels here that I have never looked at it like this before. Because, and I'm going to show you a parallel. I'm not going to get deep into it. I just want to show you the facts out of it. Is here Elijah is sent to the widow's house for his classroom teaching. But it parallels, in my opinion, that of the widow's mite that Christ taught in Mark and in Luke. Let's look real quickly. In 1 Kings 17:9 it says, Arise, get thee to Zarephath, which belongeth to Zidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow woman to sustain you. To sustain does mean food. She's going to give you some food. She's going to put a roof over your head. What turns it into a classroom? Because it is more than just the physical food. One, she's going to help maintain you during a time of waiting, but it also means nourishment, and not in the sense of physical food. In other words, there are some lessons here you're going to learn from this widow in this classroom that's going to help you and prepare you to call fire down later. See, the widow in biblical times, they had little or nothing to offer to anybody. Oftentimes, they were the forgotten members of society. And if they didn't have no sons, they had to hope that the community would help them. They were dependent upon sons or the community to help them provide their daily needs or what they had to have. But this widow's house, this poor little house became a classroom to develop Elijah's character and to develop his walk with God. And I know what you're thinking. Man, if I could just hear God's voice like Elijah did, I think my walk would be doing pretty good. I would agree with you and amen you on that one. But there's hearing God's voice, and then there's hearing God's voice and being able to call fire down. I want to do both. So when you look at the story of the widow's mite and the widow here at Zarephath, and you begin to merge them together, what is it that Elijah could learn in his waiting period that we should be learning, we should have already learned, but we could also be learning now? And that is, first of all, the pride of living. We would call it the pride of life. Because the pride of life means the love of worldly things. Now, these worldly things can be possessions. The love of life could be status, how this community perceives us. And this is kind of how I like being underestimated. Because then when I get a chance to show you something, just like the awe factor, I can't believe that just happened. I like being underestimated. I like being the underdog. But it's about status. The pride of life can be achievements. Look what I have done. Look what that's the speech. Look what I have accomplished. Look what we have built. And there's never any glory given to God. So when we begin to talk about the pride of life, that begins to lead to arrogance. Because the pride of life begins to get us in the mindset, I don't need God. I can do this on my own. We can do this. We don't need Him. Look, when we get to the point where we begin to even think that we don't need God, then we're no longer dependent upon God. Have you ever thought about, instead of watering your garden, praying for rain? Lord, because I'm going to go ahead and tell you, Steph's already proved it with some stuff we got planted at the house. God's rain's better than the rain out the faucet. That chlorine will kill something. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you, have you thought about praying for rain? Have you thought about, besides just saying the blessing at lunch, really begin to think, God, you provided that meal. Look, we were getting ready this morning and the lights began to flicker and we said, oh Lord, dear Jesus, we aren't ready. We need lights. Especially Steph, her head was wet, the hairdryer wasn't working. I ain't never heard her. I think she almost went into tongues right then. I mean, she was just right there. Lord, please don't let her have my shit. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Have you ever thought about praying? Has that been your go-to? Is your dependence on God? God, I need you more now than I've ever needed you before in my life. God, I need you to show me the next direction. Have you ever been about town during the day? And I know you got this list, you got this, but Lord, where do you need me to go? Whom do you need me to speak with? Be careful, because He's going to lead you. He's going to show you. But see, that's where the pride of life interferes with that. It becomes a hindrance. Because this widow woman had little to give. She didn't have much to offer. Her sustaining the man of God, she was exhibiting true sacrifice. Remember, I told you she had to depend on society or her sons. And her son was way young. He wasn't working yet. So she had to depend on society or whatever she could scrap up. And here God said, this woman's going to sustain. She's going to nourish you. She's going to help maintain you until I say the fast is over. Not the fast, until I say the famine is over. This woman's going to do it. So by her giving what she had to trust that God was going to keep multiplying it. Then she had to take, because most of us would have been like, that jar of meal and oil, we're going to make some cornbread, and we're going to do it quick, because what if it runs out? You know, I share with you, all right, here's your piece. Here's my piece. That's what we would do. We would be greedy. Man, it's a famine going on. Ain't 8 a year. We'd be shoving it in. So here's what's happening and going on. She's showing him true sacrifice. She's given what she has, all she has, and she has nothing left. There's nothing left over. Here's my home. Here's the food. So her gift was her life. Everything that she had belonged to God. That's a very easy statement to make. God is all yours. Do with it as you will. And what do you do when God says, sell your house? Lord, I ain't got but like a year left or 2 years left. This puppy be paid for is mine. I've worked for it. Ooh, what do we say? I worked for this. I paid this off. But we forget it's God that gave us the help to work, and God gave us the job to provide, and God's the one who sustained us and put the roof over our head. And if He says sell it, you better pray and know He told you to sell it. But are we willing to say, God, it's all yours? This church is all yours. These vessels, God, are all yours. We're going to give you all that we have, so we got to get the pride of life out of the way. And then there's the pride of giving. Giving is a self-examination. Because if we're not willing to give, there's a spiritual deception that's attached with giving. Or not giving, but that becomes a hindrance. See, self-exaltation is a spiritual deception because it exposes the carnal and the selfish struggles that hinder our purpose. See, God had to get pride of life and pride of giving out of Elijah's life so he could be the conduit to pray fire down from heaven. There couldn't be any hindrances. There couldn't be any roadblocks. There couldn't be any obstacles. And so when we talk about self-examination and it's attached with giving, here's what happens. God is protecting us from success that would destroy us. If we did not go through this period of waiting that God has put us through as a church, I'm going to paint a picture for you. Let's say post-turning point. All of a sudden, within a month, we exploded to 1,500 people. What would we do? We would look for a piece of property. We would go and build the biggest church that Craven County has ever seen with all the bells and the whistles and all that stuff going on. We would have built our kingdom on earth instead of waiting on God. You see, we would have got, and look, if this thing would have exploded right out of the gate, look what we did. That's what the vast majority of churches did post 9/11. And the crowds lasted for about a month and then they're gone. Because a lot of it God was not in. It was self-exaltation. It wasn't about giving. So what God has done in this waiting period is He's preventing us from getting the big head. In other words, when success and blessings of God are poured out on a ministry, we are quickly to say, God did it. It wasn't anything we did. The only thing we did was wait and pray and be frustrated and fuss. Ask a lot of questions. He did it. See, we got to do this. We got to get rid of this self-exaltation, and He's protecting us because I'm telling you, it's coming. And when it does, He's not looking for people who are going to get puffed up, proud. That's the religious crowd. He's looking at people saying, we're going to save souls. We're going to get them baptized in water. We're going to pray they receive the baptism of the Spirit of God. We're going to lay hands on the sick. We're going to pray and they've released from demonic possession. I mean, don't you want to see people get free? Don't you want to see chains break, doors open? Then shout like you believe it. See, it's about our giving what's left. He measures the gift in order to see. He doesn't measure the gift, but the gift is to reveal the condition of our heart. Do we want to call fire down because, look at us, we can call fire down. Look, Memorial Day weekend. You're having trouble getting your grill started? Hold on just a minute. God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Let me get your grill lit. No, that ain't why He wants us to call fire down. We'll see in a moment He wants us to call fire down because the fire points to Him. And that's what's coming. Here's a second parallel. That between Elijah and Christ's disciples. You see, when they were on the Mount of Transfiguration, they saw Christ, they saw Moses, and they saw who? Elijah. And when they went down and they met the religious crowd, they probably remembered back to 1 Kings chapter 17 and 18. Oh man, these people. And Peter and James, the sons of thunder, James and John, the sons of thunder. Can't you hear them now? Oh, I remember the teaching of Elijah. They forgot the lesson of the widow's classroom. God, I tell you what let's do. Let's call fire down on these people. Let's consume them all up and be done with them. See, this was the same lesson that Elijah had learned before he called fire down. See, 1 Kings 17:15 says, so she went away and did according to the word of Elijah, and she and he and her household ate for many days. Abraham could not wait, and Israel is having to fight today because of Abraham's patience. Think about it. He got ahead of God. Instead of waiting 20, 25 years for the promised seed, they got ahead of God. That's why they're fighting today. Lack of patience, not wanting to wait. Esau could not wait, and he lost his birthright. King Saul could not wait, and he lost a dynasty for his future inheritance to be kings over Israel. All of them could not wait on God, and all of them lost the most important aspect or the important assignment on their life. Waiting is the hardest discipline we can learn. There we go. I was waiting for everybody. Amen. See, God was going to use Elijah. Think about it. God was going to use him to call fire down from heaven. Christ's disciples also want to call that same fire down, but for the wrong reason. See, here's the lesson to learn in the waiting. Elijah could have called fire down from heaven and destroyed, because Ahab was just like Satan. He got ahead of himself. He sees the man of God coming in the distance. They meet on Mount Carmel. He calls up the 450 prophets of Baal and these over here, and they're all up there, but that wasn't enough for him. He had to call the entire nation of Israel to come up and witness what was about to happen on Mount Carmel. See, it's the same thing. You'll see a lot clearer here in a moment. So here, he got ahead of himself. He invited everybody to come up, and if Elijah had not spent time in the widow's classroom, he'd have been like the disciples. God burned them all up for worshiping Baal. Let me alone, walk off this mountain, we'll start over. But God is not out to destroy a nation. God is out to seek and to save a lost nation. God is changing how we perceive society. Because that's what the waiting has done. At first we say, they're a bunch of nuts and they deserve what they get. Now we're looking at, because now our hearts should be changing to the heart that God has. And He's saying, they don't know what they're doing. They don't understand it because there's a veil over their eyes. There's a demon speaking in their mind. And they don't understand what's going on. And now our hearts should be breaking when we look at these people and say, man, they need some Jesus. They need to come face to face with the only one who can save them, the only one who can redeem them and set them free, and they need to run face to face with Him. So God is changing our perception of society. Here's what's happening. What is frustration? Frustration becomes a fire building up inside of these earthen vessels. It becomes a fire that builds inside, and it becomes so intense because God has changed our perception of how people are, and we know they need to be saved. We know fire's got to come down from heaven, and so this intense, it starts as frustration, but it comes in this intense, and it turns into a motivation for revival. See, that's the fire. Fire is about revival that's about to hit this planet. And so God has been getting vessels of fire ready in seasons of waiting, in times of frustration, so that the zeal and the fire and the power of God, before it can be called down from heaven, it's got to start in you. A revival in which the prodigals will come home. A revival in which the sins of a nation will be wiped away and forgiven. I'm telling you, oh man, I don't want to get it myself, Paul. I feel the Spirit of God stirring this morning. And if I have something to throw, I throw it. What else did he teach Elijah in his classroom? Love your enemies. Christ rebuked his disciples for having a vengeful spirit, wanting to take retribution on them. They have forgotten the lesson that Christ had taught them earlier, to love their enemies and pray for those who despitefully use you. You see, he's talking, the type of love Christ is talking about is an agape love. And agape love is focused on giving than receiving. So that's what we've been talking about the whole time. The widow, remember the widow's mite and the giving? We just talked about it. Agape love is focused, because the giving shows the condition of the heart. True Christian love sees other people and places great value on them. We don't see them as the drag queen. We don't see them as the prostitute. We don't see them in those lifestyles, those lifestyles. What we see is a soul. And we realize that soul has great value. It has so much value, Jesus Christ came and died for that soul. And so what should it be motivating us to do? Because giving is about sacrifice. We should be willing to sacrifice our time instead of being so busy trying to get to the store and get back home so we can get back and run. We should be willing to sacrifice our time. Lord, we see a nation. How much time have we put together corporately as a church in prayer? Rather than run home or run to Smithfields or whatever. Are we willing to give up our time? Are you willing to give up your money? See, that hits home right there. Because a lot of people's heart's not here, it's back here. That's where the wallet's at. Are you willing to give? How about in your effort? Are you giving everything, sacrificing, and you've got nothing left? Matter of fact, you've given so much in this Sunday morning church service. When you go home, you have got to take a nap because this service wore you out. Have you sacrificed that much? See, true love is unselfish. It is about loving people. And we never think of ourselves. We put ourselves last, and we're looking at those souls, and we're trying to put people first. See, if you serve without love, you're wasting your time. You could serve and do all you want, do everything, and say, I'm doing it for God. But if you're really not doing it out of love, you're not doing it for the right person, you got a job. You're working. So now we take the lessons of the classroom. And now we take the frustrated Christian that's in waiting. And we got to move forward in our timetable. Because I believe it's time to call fire down from heaven. 1 Kings 18:21. And Elijah came to all the people and said, how long will you falter between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, follow him. But the people, listen, get this. The people answered him not a word. They didn't know what to say. I'll tell you why. Currently, there are two opinions that have emerged since the transition. The first seeks to destroy this nation. And just as Jezebel introduced Baal worship to Israel, there are those who have introduced Satan's agenda to the United States. Currently, right now, the term is woke culture. And if you take everything they're doing in woke culture and you parallel it with Baal worship, they are identical. These elitists have attempted to redefine everything that God Himself set in order. They are responsible for gender re-identification as God made them male and female. They have infiltrated our higher schools of learning with a socialist and communist agenda, knowing they are but one generation away from fundamentally changing this nation. That's how Hitler took over Germany. They have turned the opinions of many to chant from the river to the sea, meaning they desire a total annihilation of the Jewish culture. And it has driven this nation further away from God. Now, the other opinion that is emerging has a totally different agenda. They recognize how far this nation has digressed in such a short and rapid period of time. They see the dangers of CRT being taught in our schools. They are standing up fighting to try to keep men out of female sports. They are demanding accountability in our colleges to stop brainwashing our next generation of leaders. They have emerged, drawing a line in the sand, and they are saying enough is enough. And they're looking to take the nation back. See, we're missing the biggest picture of all. Out of all of that, and all of that sounds great, the biggest picture of all is revival. You see, while God has a lot of people in the waiting room, unsure of what to do next or what the next step may be, knowing that in this waiting room, God Himself has been working on us, here's what we cannot miss. He has also been working in this world. You see, the world right now in this nation is faltering between two opinions, and they don't know who to believe. See, that is when the ground itself, because I told you what happened in Elijah's day, right? And we know fire came from heaven. We have the same thing happening in our day, and because the same thing is happening, we must know and understand that God has gotten the grounds ready for revival. See, they no longer believe the lie that they have been spoon-fed, but they don't know yet which way to turn. They realize everything they have been told by the media has been lies, and they are seeking for truth. God has been breaking the fallow ground and has been preparing this nation for revival. How do I know that things are about to turn and shift? Because so far the people's been standing up making a stand. A lot of them are not Christians. So God still has those being supplied in the widow's house, still learning their lesson, still being prepared for their assignment. But they're about to be released to go to Mount Carmel. Oh man. They're about to stand in the face of kings and rulers. They're about to stand in the front of the mass of the false prophets that have invaded this nation on Mount Carmel. But there's also a nation that's surrounding that mountain watching to see who's going to come out on top. 1 Kings 18 verse 30, the first part. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come near to me." So all the people came near to him. Here's the whole, I want you to understand this. Notice that Elijah learned his lessons in the widow's house, in that classroom. How do we know? Instead of calling fire down or rebuking them or destroying them or browbeating them with the Word of God, instead, with a gentle voice, in a gentle voice, he kneels down on the ground and he invites them, "Come near to me." And in order for them to come near to him, means they got to walk away from the deception. They got to walk away from the lies. They got to walk away from the false and the deceivers. And he's inviting them, get away from them and come away here. He knew they were looking for truth. And he said, if you'll come here, I'll show you truth. This was an invitation for that nation to come and to join in on what God was about to do. Because fire had not been called down yet. How does this happen? 1 Kings 18:30, the last half of that verse. And he repaired the altar of the Lord that was broken in pieces. What was it that Elijah did? He saw where there was an altar to God before and it had been destroyed. And it was scattered. It didn't look like it for itself. It didn't look like the altar that their fathers and the ones before them had prayed at and had sacrificed on. It was just totally dismantled. And so Elijah gets down and he says, come here, come here. Let me show you something. He begins to take 12 stones. He begins to arrange them in the order that their fathers taught them. He begins to rebuild this altar. And what is he doing is when he invite the people in, he's bringing them in unity, but he's also showing them, in spite of whatever differences that you have, let me show you what will bring you back together. Remember, we're supposed to be one nation under God. Let me bring you back in and show you. What's he doing when he grabs the 12 stones? He says, let me remind you of the covenant that God made with Abraham, he made with Isaac, and he made with Jacob. Each of those 12 stones represented one of the 12 sons of Jacob, whom they were descendants. He says, let me remind you that our God is a covenant-keeping God, and he never backs down on his promise, and that the call of God is irrevocable. It does not change. Let me remind you, as a nation, who you were called out to be. A lighthouse, a city set on a hill to show the nations of this world who the one true God is. And that was the blessing pronounced over this nation at the inception of its nation. He said, let me show you. Let me remind you of the covenant. Let me remind you this morning at this altar that Jesus Christ laid his life down for every single one of us. He gave of his blood, and by that blood there has been a covenant ratified in heaven on our behalf, that whosoever calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Let me remind you, Christ died for our redemption. Let me remind you this morning, as we rebuild the altar, that we need to renew the covenant. You see, a covenant is renewed by doing your first works over again. You may have been cut off in traffic this week and lost your cool. Or you may have totally turned cold and walked away from God. But you could come back and rebuild the altar of God and renew it, because you go back to God and say, God will forgive you over and over. He doesn't give up on you. So we shouldn't give up on Him. As he's building this altar, what else is he reminding them? I was reminded, who's he reminding them of? Not just the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but it also reminds them of Jacob. See, in 1 Kings 18:31 it says, and Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, Israel shall be your name. And when Israel was rebirthed, Israel shall be your name. They remembered the covenant. They remembered the land. They remembered everything. That's why they're here today. He's reminding them, as they're all standing around watching, Israel. What does that mean? Israel means that you strive with God. You get down and you pray and you dig and you get into the Word and you let the Word get in you and you strive with God. Remember, Jacob is the one who wrestled with God. He strove with God. But Israel also means to persevere. Despite every impossibility, the nation of Israel should have been wiped off the earth in 70 AD and never restored as a nation. But Israel's God is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the covenant-keeping God. Almost 2,000 years went by, and He restored them as a nation. They persevered. If they can persevere, this nation can persevere. This church can persevere. But it perseveres when we strive with God. When we get down and wrestle with God. And what did He do? He says, God, I'm not letting go of my promise. I'm not letting go of this covenant. I'm not letting go. See, revival comes when we remember who we are, why we were created. When we remember what God birthed this church and birthed this nation for. Revival will come when we grab hold of God and we don't let go. Are you going to live by your old name? Or are you going to let God change you? That was the question that He asked Jacob. Are you going to continue to live in your past? Are you going to continue to do the things that you used to do? Are you going to continue to go by the old? Or are you going to keep wrestling with God and let God change you into the new creation that He purposed you to be, to discover your will and His plan for your life, and to give it all to God? Are you going to let Him change you? Fire is a sign. 1 Kings 18, verse 36, the last half. Elijah the prophet came near and said, this is Elijah's prayer we're going to look at really quick. Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are the God in Israel. I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. The first thing we got to keep in mind is keeping things in their proper order. God is always first. You want revival in your life? You want a new name written there? Then put Him first in everything that you do. But it's also, we want revival, we want to call fire down, then we got to wait. We got to put things in their order. Elijah invited people to do their best to make sure. I loved it. This part I love. I want y'all to come together because you were tearing between two opinions. I know I still haven't convinced you about building the altar. So here's what I want you to do. Start pouring water on this thing. Dig a ditch around it. Totally saturate it. Make it impossible. That's He said, make it impossible for this thing to be ignited by fire. Well, we know how that story goes. But here's how I know we're ready. Let it be impossible. It looks dark and it looks impossible right now. And it looks like God is the furthest thing from everybody's mind. That's why church attendance is drastically falling off a cliff like it is. God is the last, not the first. God made it impossible. You think it won't ignite. You think it won't start. Elijah's saying, stack everything against me. Make it impossible. But here's what he does in his prayer. God, you see all things are impossible. But with you, all things are possible. So I'm putting it in your hands. Have you ever thought about letting go and let God be God? You hold on sometimes to your children too tight. Well, they're going to make a mistake. They may go the wrong way. Put them in God's hands. Let God decide the mate for them. Let God lead them and guide them. Have you ever thought about this nation? When I say let Him go and let God, we got to build the altar. But I'm saying let God take control. In 1 Kings 18:37, what was a sign? He says, hear me, O Lord, hear me, that these people may know that you are the Lord God, and that you have turned their hearts back to you again. See, God, this whole process was to search the hearts now of a nation. Our waiting is to search our heart, to know the intent of the heart of every individual. So when the fire comes down, if God answered by fire and consumed the sacrifice, the fire reveals that somebody has turned their hearts to God. That's what it reveals. If you have truthfully repented, the fire of God's in you. The fire is a sign that you have repented and turned to God. How do we know this nation has turned back to God? A revival text that most people overlook is Malachi 4:6, when it says that the hearts of the fathers shall be turned toward the children, and the hearts of the children shall be turned to the fathers. What happened post-COVID? The people realized how the government was affecting their children and brainwashing them. And so parents began to stand up, saved or unsaved, and say, not my child. What happened? Their heart now began to be moved to the child. Do you see it? That's the revival text. How do we know this nation and the land has been turned up, is ready for revival? Because we have witnessed, and we are still witnessing, people's hearts being turned towards the children. You will not re-identify the gender of my child. That was born a female or a male, and you have no right at it. People are standing up and saying, no is no. What's happening? Their hearts are being turned. True revival will rid the land out of the evil that affects the heart. 1 Kings 18, verse 38, first part. Then fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice. Now there was stone, there was wood, there was water, and there was a sacrifice. But notice when the fire came, it only consumed in a specific order. The sacrifice was consumed first. Fire of God will not fall where nothing has died. Oh, let me repeat that. I worked hours on that one phrase. The fire of God will not fall where nothing has died. If we're going to witness the fire of God fall on our lives in this altar, then we have to die. The fire's not going to fall if we're still holding on to things. And we're still not willing to let go. So to witness the fire fall on us and to fall on this generation, we've got to die, folks. The church has got to die. You see, the founders of this nation lost everything to establish this nation under God. What are we willing to sacrifice in order that people should not perish? What are we willing to sacrifice? 1 Kings 18:39 says this. Now when all the people saw it, there's the key phrase, they fell on their faces and they said, the Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. If I were looking to purchase a vehicle, and I come to you for advice and say, man, I'm looking at a truck. What's the best truck I can buy? Now look, no comments here. I understand this could split a church. And you were to come to me and say, best truck on the market's a Ford. Ford is the way to go. But then I do this number, look around you and be like, I have a question. If Ford is the way to go, then why are you driving a Chevy? See, we have a nation desperately seeking for truth. People are passing us by every day wondering which way to turn. And it becomes difficult to convince people to come closer and to see what God is doing when too many Christians are heading in the wrong direction themselves. Why should they desire what we have when there is no fire in our furnace? How can we call fire down when we have no fire? Why would they even want to come here when there's no fire in here? The fire in here is contingent on what you do and what your furnace is when you show up. How can we convince them when we're faltering between two opinions? See, in our opening, I spoke of 3 Christians that emerged post-COVID. The woke church, the normal church, but yet those who are called to go further. I believe we fall into that last category. See, we have experienced the waiting period. Like an arrow sitting on a bow and the string being pulled back, the arrow can feel the tension of the string just before it is released. See, we do not see the depravity of a nation. We see a nation primed for revival. Notice what caused the people to fall on their face and exclaim that the Lord is God. They saw it. See, everybody's been told a whole lot. See, this waiting period has not been a waste of time. It's been a time in which God has been doing His greatest work in us and even in this nation. See, we are being primed just like this nation. The difference that's going to draw people into this church is when the fire ignites and it falls on us. See, you can convince people a whole lot easier when they see the fire in you and they see the fire in the church and things are backed up by demonstration by God. See, when you actually believe, you can convince them better when you believe what you're actually saying. See, when you become a conduit for the glory of God in your community and in your families and in surrounding areas, when you are totally different from anything and everything else that they have already experienced, and they see it for themselves. See, I believe by Scripture that fire and the fire of God is about to fall on the nations of this world. I believe it. You'll never convince me any different. I believe we're about to witness a revival unlike anything that has ever been recorded in history. I'll believe it. And I'll believe it till my dying breath. I'll believe it. We will see the glory of God fall on a nation and on a people, turning them from the depths of hell. I believe it. If we desire the fire. If we're willing to change. Then my point would be this. Let's ready ourselves for fire. And let's begin to pray for God. Send the fire. Fill me with the fire. Show me what I need to do to receive the fire. Everybody, please stand.